So I'm Michael. This is Bianca. Bianca has Crohn's disease, which is a variation of inflammatory bowel disease. And she's obviously in a lot of pain, but that's not the worst of her problems. You see, she's likely to have short stature, stunted growth, possibility of arthritis, and without adequate treatment, she's in line. She's got a 25% chance of surgery in the next 3 years. So the question is, how do we help her? What's the right way to figure out the best treatments, not for people like her, but for her? And her parents are trying all kinds of things, because most of Bianca's care actually happens outside of the clinic. They're trying diet, they're trying meds, they're trying lifestyle changes. And Bianca's doctor, Dr. Rowan, is also trying to help Bianca, but the best evidence at Dr. Rowan's fingertips, the evidence from clinical trials, is not the best evidence for Bianca, because clinical trials actually look at an average effect on groups of people. And you might say, you know, this drug has a 40% efficacy. Nobody's 40%. You're either 1 or 0. We just don't know yet. So a lot of times what happens when you go to the doctor's office is the doctor says, we have this drug. We think it works. Why don't you take it? And as Paul said earlier this morning, come back in 3 months. This is the trial. It's not a very good trial, and it's not a very well-documented trial, because we just ask you to come back in 3 months. Meanwhile, if you're actively experiencing symptoms and you're having problems, you may be trying all kinds of things yourself, and depending on your relationship with your doctor, and we've heard a little bit about that this morning, you may or may not tell your doctor what you're doing. And so depending on how well you're tracking things, you're also doing a parallel self-experiment, maybe very rigorously, maybe not. But the idea here is that the experiments are parallel. You come back in 3 months, Dr. Rowan says, so how'd it work? And you say, good. And that's great. Well, did it work a little bit? Yeah, I think it worked a little bit. Okay, well, let's up the dose, and we'll try that. No, wait a second, hold on. Because it doesn't take into account all the things that I was doing. It doesn't take into account some of the other things that I might have been doing instead of taking some of my medicines every day. What's missing in this whole scenario is a system for aggregating the patient data and connecting it with the clinical data and using that data together, patients and doctors together, to make decisions. So, full disclosure, I am not an MD. I'm a psychologist, and I study behavioral and social science. But I work with MDs, and I don't play one on TV. But psychologists have been thinking about N of 1 studies for a long time, and they've been used in the medical literature, as Ian said, for a number of years. But they're really hard to do, as you know, and they're really hard to do for doctors because there are only one of you, and doctors have many, many patients. And so that makes it even more difficult, and is one of the reasons why N of 1 kinds of studies, personal experiments, haven't really taken off in the clinical setting. But there are new tools. There are new technologies. We have ways of measuring patient-reported outcomes on an ongoing basis, both active forms of patient-reported outcomes like surveys. The NIH has worked to develop the PROMISE questionnaires. PeatsQL is a health-related quality of life measure, and passive measures like Ginger.io, like Fitbit, YThings, Zio. There are also large population registries where you can not only know about yourself, but you can also compare. You have large registries of patients who, so you can use them. You can aggregate clinical information and outcomes data and process data, and you can use those for quality improvement, for comparative effectiveness research. So the opportunity is to, as I said, integrate these patient-reported outcomes and the patient-reported data and the clinical data, and use that data to make decisions. And we have a robust foundation for actually doing this work. Thomas earlier today talked about doctors who didn't know how to do process improvement. Well, we're actually when I heard that, I was like, yay, we're doing that. So we're working with Improved Care Now, which is a collaborative now of, I had to update the slide, it was 44 care sites across the country and the United Kingdom that are treating patients with inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis. There are more than 310 physicians now and more than 13,000 of the estimated 50,000 patients with kids with pediatric IBD. And what they've done is they've developed a registry. They share data. They've been taught, they've learned how to do system improvement at the practice level. And they do what they say, share seamlessly and steal shamelessly from one another. And it's actually hard to say, and it's hard to do, but they've created a culture, and here's another point. They've created a culture of sharing. And by sharing the data, by sharing the information that comes from the data, and by sharing best practices, they've actually increased the remission rate for the kids that they care for from about 60% to about 75% with no new drugs. Now, if you could bottle that, you'd call it Improvimab, and you'd patent it. But this is a different kind of thing. In addition to Improved Care Now, we have some work that we've done funded by HRQ to develop an enhanced registry where data gets put in once during the course of clinical care and then can be queried for quality improvement and comparative effectiveness research. And we're part of the C3N project, the Collaborative Chronic Care Network, which is a way of trying to put the right data in the right patient's hands at the right time and connect them with the right people to create a platform where patients and doctors can actually collaborate together, make it easier to collect the data and use it to derive actionable knowledge, to make decisions together, and then plow that data back into the learning system. The C3N, we say, is a platform for a learning healthcare system. Part of what we do in the C3N project is we use some of these design and engineering principles of starting a very, very small prototyping and learning a lot before we actually start rolling this out. But I want to tell you the rest of Bianca's story. So this is clearly not her name, but Bianca has a colostomy, and she's very, very tired all the time. Why is she tired? Because of her colostomy, she has to get up about 8 or 9 times a night to stool. And she noticed, as a result of tracking her stooling, a run of about 9 days where she only had to get up at about two times. This is in the context of she and her doctor trying Remicade or infliximab as a way of controlling her Crohn's disease. And then she kept tracking and found another run where she didn't have to get up at all. And what was interesting about that is one of the things that she and her doctor were talking about was looking at probiotics and the potential for probiotics to control her nightly stooling. This is an antibiotic. And she was on amoxicillin because she had a cold. Not a cold, but a sinus infection. And it was that data brought back to her doctor's office caused them to change their treatment plan and look at the effect of rifaximin. I'm not a doctor. Another locally released antibiotic. And so the question was, can we actually replicate this? So as a result of actually tracking and then bringing the data back to the clinical, the clinician's office, we're actually making changes in how we're actually treating the disease. The problem here is that, as we've discussed, this is very difficult to scale. And what you need is not only a data acquisition and management service, we need a user interface, and we need to be able to incorporate these N of 1 learnings into the clinical practice. Part of what we're working with within the C3N is knowing how to take the clinical work processes and change them and integrate new ideas into them, because the clinical ecosystem within the office is very sort of time-driven and frenetic, and you definitely don't want to make it so that it's harder for clinicians to do this. You want to make it easier. So with Ian, we're actually starting to build out a web portal for this work. And MyIBD allows you to track your symptoms. It allows you to standardize your measures that you're tracking. It allows you to come up with recipes or personal experiments that you can use. And then the next thing that it's going to be able to do is allow the doctors to actually look across patients and begin to aggregate the experiences of patients. And Ida is actually going to talk to you about how do we aggregate.